So far as the delegation is concerned, it has a very pointed objective. The events between the 7th and the 10th of May became necessary was because Pakistan does not give up its fundamental or basic behavior as a rogue state. That's the bottom line. The preponderance of evidence against Pakistan is so huge. After all, Osama bin Laden was not caught in Allahabad. He was caught in Abottabad. Those are incontrovertible facts. The nuclear shield cannot be used as an instrument of blackmail. There is a need for the government of India to have a discussion with China, a structured discussion.
Operation Sindoor is now moving to the realm of diplomacy, and several all party teams will soon be knocking on the doors of various world capitals. Manish Tewari, senior Congress leader, former minister, and member of parliament, is a part of one such team. You have been briefed by Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri. What is the core message that you are carrying to Qatar, Egypt, and the other countries that you're visiting? What are the points that the government wants highlighted?
The essential message which these delegations, which are reaching out to different capitals around the world, are carrying is that the terror infrastructure, which has been very assiduously put in place by the deep state of Pakistan, which now goes back a good 45 years, has been repeatedly and consistently used to target India. Invariably, in most of the cases, the victims or their targets have been innocent civilians in India. And under those circumstances, the events that played out between the night of 7th of May and the evening of 10th of May was almost like a last straw on the camel's back. And thus, the actions which India initiated in order to try and dismantle this infrastructure of terror was in keeping in with the our right to self-defense, which is guaranteed under the United Nations Charter, as also our right to protect our citizens.
Fair enough. The delegations, I'm given to understand, will be apprising foreign capitals about the new normal in India's approach to terrorism emanating from Pakistan. What is this new normal?
Well, see, this is phraseology that this is a new normal. In fact, what the delegations are going to be telling their interlocutors is that if India is targeted by the terror infrastructure in Pakistan, then notwithstanding the nuclearization of South Asia, there will be a response. In other words, the nuclear shield cannot be used as an instrument of blackmail in order to repeatedly use semi-state actors to keep hitting India and especially hitting our innocent civilians. So if you would like to extrapolate it and call it a new normal, that the nuclear blackmail which Pakistan relies upon, essentially as some kind of a guarantee that India will not retaliate effectively because there is an escalation, and once you are on an escalatory ladder without any off ramps, then things can gain a momentum of their own. So that approach of Pakistan is no longer going to work. If there is a terror outrage, there will be an appropriate response using conventional means.
The moot question, however, Manish Tewari, is has this message sunk into Pakistan as well as the non-state actors who work as the deep state's proxies? I mean, you said it's been going on for 45 years. Where is the guarantee that there will not be another attack?
Well, there are no guarantees, Haridarji. Ultimately, there are no guarantees. If you were to say that a retaliation uh, puts enough fear of God into them that they do not go down that same path again, I think we would be really living in a fool's paradise or cuckoo's land, were we to assume or imagine that because of one retaliatory strike, whether it was in 2019 in the case of Balakot or post Pahalgam, is going to bring an end to all terror attacks. I don't think that's really a strategic calculation which any reasoned set of decision makers would make. Essentially, what India is trying to tell the world, and I think tried to tell Pakistan through those strikes which took place between the 7th and the 10th of May, that if you use your semi state actors, be prepared for a conventional response. If it gets escalatory, the onus is on you.
But it keeps getting escalatory. You had Uri, then you had Pulwama, then you had Pahalgam. And let's look at what's happening in Pakistan. General Munir, the army chief, is now the field marshal. He has shored up his image after the military escalation between India and Pakistan, what we saw between May 7 and May 10. He's actually managed to shore up his own image.
Well, has he really managed to shore up his own image? The jury is out on that. And whether this promotion to field marshal is really a lot of bravado, trying to cover up for what essentially has been very effective punishment which has been meted out to the Pakistani deep state, are really matters of conjecture. Or is it preparation for another coup d'etat that Asim Munir has been promoted to field marshal? So therefore, notwithstanding what the internal dynamics in Pakistan are, I think what's been concerning people and decision makers in India, now going back many decades, that how do you effectively try and deal with the scourge of semi-state actors, which are financed, resourced, trained, equipped, and then sent across the border by Pakistan? Do you use non-conventional means or do you use conventional means? And I think somewhere that dilemma has been clinched very effectively in the case of Pahalgam, where the retaliation was of an order that it was not a one-off. It went on for 3 days. Yes, obviously, Pakistan also retaliated. So when you have an escalatory situation, to expect the adversary not to retaliate would actually be foolish. But the
escalation has to be factored in, yes.
So, but what needs to be what is the nimble trick in this? And this is called the escalation dynamics. That you should know as to at what point in time you need to de-escalate, because obviously you do not want escalation to gain its own momentum after your tactical objectives have been achieved. It is then in your interest to see that there is a de-escalation on your own terms. And therefore, in this particular case, the call which was initiated by the Director General of Military Operations in Pakistan, first at 12 noon and then at 3:30 in the afternoon, effectively allows one to conclude that the de-escalation happened on India's terms.
Well, I beg to differ on that because the fact, and let's call a spade, the ceasefire was brokered by US President Donald Trump. He has tweeted about it not once, but multiple times. And the US did play a role. I mean, surely you will concede that point.
Well, you see, in any crisis situation, especially between two de facto nuclear weapon states, other principal stakeholders in the world are talking to both sides. So, therefore, this is a given now going back to the Gates mission of 1990. It happened when Pakistan got paranoid about Indian mobilization in the Western deserts uh, in the May of 1990, and then started flashing the N word, which prompted Robert Gates, who was then Deputy National Security Advisor to the United States of America, serving President George Bush 41, to actually fly in from Moscow, where he was assisting the Secretary of State to prepare for a summit between Mikhail Gorbachev and George Bush 1. Then again during Operation Parakram. And you've written about it very extensively, right? That when Operation Parakram happened, and during Operation Parakram, when the Kalchuk incident took place, there were two escalatory peaks, what is called the Twin Peaks crisis. In both instances, you had this back channeling take place. Then similarly, you had back channeling in 2008 after Mumbai. You had back channeling taking place even when the Uri strikes were initiated,
Even during Kargil.
and during Kargil, and you had back channeling, even after the Pulwama Barak. So the difference between them and then and now is that there were people in the United States of America or in the establishment who believed that back channeling meant back channeling. In the case of President Trump, the back channeling actually means front channeling. So therefore,
that doesn't suit India. It hates third party mediation. And, the end result, if I may point out, is that India and Pakistan have gotten hyphenated once again. And number two, Kashmir is back on the table as an international issue. That's what was achieved.
I would tend to disagree with you. See, mediation, there's a difference between crisis management and mediation. Mediation is when two parties consciously accept a third party as a mediator. In the case of India and Pakistan, India has never agreed to any formal third party mediation.
It doesn't agree formally, but it agrees when it suits them. When Nawaz Sharif, let me complete, when Nawaz Sharif was called by Bill Clinton during Kargil, and Bill Clinton clearly told him that he needs to withdraw the army from the heights of Kargil, it suited us at that point of time. So, formal, informal, these are semantics.
No, they are not semantics. You see, let me explain it. Now, in the case of Kargil, it is not clear even till now whether Nawaz Sharif dashed to Washington, D.C. on his own on the 4th of July, 1999, or he was called by Bill Clinton.
It's irrelevant. The point is
there are contested narratives on that. As I was earlier pointing out, that third-party mediation has a very specific legal connotation. And mediation means when you accept a third party as a mediator, which has not been the case between India and Pakistan after the 1972 Simla Agreement. But yes, if you are trying to extrapolate crisis management by other concerned stakeholders as third-party mediation, well, that's a question of semantics.
Well, the bottom line is that Trump did, play a role.
Well, Trump did play a role in 2019 also.
That's correct. So that's the point I'm making. That it wasn't just a case of the Pakistani DGMO calling his counterpart in India. It was also being nudged by Washington.
Well, obviously, there must have been a lot of back channeling going on, not only limited to the United States of America. Other stakeholders would also be in the act, and they would have been talking to both sides. And this is a normal in the case of any conflict. You've had India advising both Russia and Ukraine to settle their differences. Now, would you call that third-party mediation of India between Russia and Ukraine? No. Or for that matter, now that the United States of America is very actively engaged between Ukraine and Russia to try and bring about a ceasefire in that war which has been going on since the February of 2022, would that be called formal mediation? In my estimation, no. According to me, formal mediation commences when you formally accept the terms of reference of a mediation and it gets drawn up and somebody is appointed as the mediator.
I understand that. I'm going beyond the technicality, but while we are on the subject of third party, let's talk about the Indus Water Treaty that was underwritten by the World Bank. There was actually a third party. Now India has put that in abeyance. You will be asked questions on the Indus Water Treaty being put in abeyance when you visit various countries. Pakistan has called it an act of war. I mean, what is India's answer to the fact that a treaty undersigned by the World Bank has been put in abeyance?
Well, first of all, the World Bank is not a guarantor of that treaty. There is a difference between a third party being a signatory on the treaty.
The point being made is that India cannot unilaterally walk out of or put in abeyance the treaty.
Where India,
point of view.
Well, both the parties do have the right to put it into abeyance. So, therefore, under public international law, if let us suppose the circumstances materially change, nothing prevents the contracting parties, and if they are high state parties, of putting that arrangement into abeyance. So, it is perfectly legal under public international law. There is absolutely no contradiction with regard to that. And there is nothing in the text of the treaty which says that one party cannot abrogate or one party cannot put it in abeyance without the permission of the World Bank. You see, ultimately, all intergovernmental arrangements are based upon the mutual trust and faith which countries have amongst themselves. This is the foundational principle of international law.
Let me play the devil's advocate. Why punish the people of Pakistan? They're not the ones exporting terror.
Well, it's not.
Isolate the deep state. You know, the citizenry in Pakistan is not happy. We know that from the way they have treated Imran Khan. How fair is it to punish the people of Pakistan?
Well, the citizenry in Pakistan then should ensure that they have an effective, responsible government in place that exercises oversight over their military and the so-called deep state and does not allow them to create instability in the entire South Asian region. So,
action, that's not possible.
Under those circumstances, if you are unable to elect a responsible government which is powerful enough in order to rein in these elements and essentially change the equation, which is that a state should have a military rather than the military having a state, and then you expect that the state that you are hitting repeatedly, you are targeting people based upon faiths, you are picking them up and shooting them in cold blood, and you've been doing this for the past 45 years. You've covered Punjab during the 80s. You remember how people of a particular community, the Hindus, were being pulled out of buses and shot. And this was basically being done to create a divide in Punjab, which fortunately never happened because of the essence of Punjab, Punjabi and Punjabiyat. And eventually, more Sikhs ended up getting killed in that unfortunate conflagration between 1980 and 1995 in Punjab rather than Hindus. But the ISI's game plan has always been to try and create a divide between the communities. And this is exactly what was perpetrated in Pahalgam. If the people wouldn't have come together and exhibited a sense of united outrage against what has happened. And when I talk about people, I also include the people of Jammu and Kashmir. The people of Jammu and Kashmir rose as one.
I think the Kashmiri Street has made it very clear and said, not in our name. Let me move to the next question, Manish. The delegations will be talking to several countries. And each country has its own sensitivity and sensibility. You are going to Qatar. I mean, I don't need to remind you, you understand the sensitivities involved. Qatar was the first country to show deep displeasure after BJP spokesperson Nupur Sharma's comments on the Prophet were seen as derogatory. Dialogue is always a two-way street. You are going there as part of an outreach program. You will be asked questions about India's human rights records, about the way we treat dissent, and about, let's take the latest example, how the Ashoka University professor, Ali Mehbudabad, was picked up in front of his 9-month pregnant wife and jailed. What has he said that is so offensive?
Well, I think
Questions that you have to be ready to answer.
But I think you were presuming the questions. So therefore, it would really depend upon how the interlocution plays itself out.
Maybe I'm helping you. Maybe if this question is asked, what is your answer, Manish?
Well, in the sense, I don't respond to hypothetical questions. We have a very
Real question. I've given you the backdrop.
no.
Yes.
See, ultimately, this is going to be an interlocution between two sovereign nation states. So therefore, to anticipate as to what somebody else is going to say or not say is being absolutely unfair to them. So, insofar as the delegation is concerned, it has a very pointed objective, and that pointed objective is to explain to global opinion that the reason why the events between the 7th and the 10th of May became necessary was because Pakistan does not give up its fundamental or basic behavior as a rogue state. That's the bottom line.
But what did he say that was offensive in the first place?
When essentially,
thousands of people have shared that post. Are we going to arrest everybody?
Well, you see, you are now getting into a domestic dynamic.
I'm not. Because I'm asking you this specifically because you are going to Qatar.
No, I refuse to be drawn into a discussion as to what could be the anticipated questions of any interlocutor in any country.
I don't want to answer a question.
No. That's being completely unfair to the interlocutors. But to your direct question, we've always believed in the freedom of speech and expression. And in fact, I was the first one to condemn his arrest. I was the first one to go on record condemning his arrest. So therefore, I don't think there's any contradiction between them. What happened to Ali Mahmoodabad was a complete reversity of law.
And the fact that lynchings do take place and the homes of the minority community are bulldozed, these are facts.
Well, ultimately, as I earlier pointed out to you, and at the risk of repetition recreation, may I again point out that the objective of this mission is to try and sensitize world opinion in different capitals around the world as to why the events of 7th to 10th of May were essential in order to bring a rogue state called Pakistan, which uses terror as an instrument of state policy to heal.
The terrorists responsible for Pahalgam have still not been arrested or killed as of now, as we record this interview. Apart from questions of their identity, who they are, where they came from, there are also questions about security and intelligence lapses.
Well, none of these questions take away from the larger reality that the principal source of terror in South Asia, not only directed at India, but also directed at their Western neighbor, Afghanistan, is Pakistan. So therefore, there is a much broader context than the correct tactical questions that you ask. These questions obviously have to be answered, but these are questions which have to be asked in the Parliament of India by the appropriate stakeholders of India's democratic process. Insofar as the delegation is concerned, that the delegation's principal role is to expose and sensitize global opinion as to how Pakistan over 4.5 decades has been this terror factory.
I am not disputing that.
So therefore, that is the limited objective.
I'm asking a more specific question. I'm saying in the case of Pahalgam, there is a smoking gun. It is different from 26/11 when Ajmal Kasab, a Pakistani citizen, was caught alive.
So therefore, if I were to
There are certain envoys who have been briefed by the government of India and quoted in the international press saying that there is perhaps a degree, there's a lack of credible evidence to directly link Pahalgam with Pakistan.
So let me reverse this question. Hypothetically, assuming Ajmal Kasab wouldn't have got caught, you mean to say that 26/11 wouldn't have been a Pakistani operation?
Of course not. There was 1 minute in the case when there was a pile of evidence. There was the fishing trawler in which the captain was lying dead. There were satellite phones with Pakistani markings. There was a whole lot of evidence.
Yeah, so therefore, let's also not forget that 26/11 played.
I'm not saying Pakistan did not do Pahalgam. I'm saying the link has to be established beyond.
Well, ultimately, we are not arguing in the court of law that you have to be innocent, you have to be guilty beyond reasonable doubt. We are arguing in the court of global opinion, where the preponderance of evidence against Pakistan is so huge. After all, Osama bin Laden was not caught in Allahabad, he was caught in Abbottabad. Those are incontrovertible facts. The body of evidence which links Pakistan to terror is so huge and so convincing that you can legitimately ask this question that why didn't we do this exercise earlier?
I'm not questioning the fact that Pakistan exports terror, Manish Tewari. I have covered Kashmir. I have been to Pakistan. I've even been to the Lashkar headquarters. All I'm saying is, drawing your attention to, is the view within a section of the international community that there is a smoking gun in the case of Pahalgam. That's the limited.
Well, you see, I do not think that there is a smoking gun. Eventually, there are 26 acts of killing which have been carried. Those 26 acts of killings would have either translated into a common FIR, most probably a common FIR or a different FIR. Eventually, the NIA will have to present a charge sheet in the appropriate court. So it was on 22nd of April, 2025, that this outrage took place. We are talking a month later. So I think the investigating agencies should be given time to really present their evidence in a court of law before we jump to the conclusion.
Let's come to the reaction of the Congress party. They are unhappy with the people the government has picked. I mean, the government has picked you, Shashi Tharoor, Salman Khurshid, all former ministers, established senior Congress voices, very articulate, may I add. Isn't the Congress leadership scoring a self-goal at a time when the country ought to stay united against?
I refuse to be drawn into it for the simple reason we are looking at a larger objective at this point in time. And the larger objective I have explained ad nauseum to you over the past many minutes. So I don't think it is appropriate or relevant to enter into this domain at this point in time. But suffice to say, the whole question of terror is very personal to me. So having been a victim of terror, whenever there is an incident of this kind, which convulses your soul, you obviously feel that if there is anything that you can do to expose the fountainhead of this terror or the infrastructure of this terror, you should do your bit. I mean, that's it.
You're referring to your father who was riddled with bullets.
So therefore, to me, the whole question of terror is very personal, and under those circumstances, if there is something which you can do, or in any manner, if you can contribute to exposing that infrastructure of terror, which India unfortunately has been at the receiving end of for the past 45 years, it's just something that should be done.
Have you had a word with anybody in the party after being picked to be a part of a delegation?
Haridurji, I don't think these questions are relevant at this point in time. And as I earlier said, I refuse to be drawn into it.
Is your party unhappy? Let me ask you straight.
Well, as I said, I'm not going to be drawn into it. For me, the larger question, the larger objective is something which one needs to keep in mind. And the larger purpose and the larger objective is fairly clear in this particular case.
Let me bring to your notice, not that you don't already know. Rahul Gandhi is demanding to know if terrorists escaped facilities in Pakistan because Foreign Minister Jai Shankar said that Pakistan had been informed about Operation Sindoor.
Well, as I earlier said, that there are two very, very different aspects of this entire paradigm. One is the role of Pakistan in exporting terror to India. And the other is as to how the operation was or was not handled. That's an internal dynamic at play.
I'm talking about Rahul Gandhi's statement, Manish.
So therefore, that's an internal dynamic at play. We are at the moment focused on the first part of it, which is exposing the role of Pakistan.
A bit very painful about what you say about the Congress party.
Sorry?
You're being very guarded and careful about what you're saying about the Congress party.
Well, I think I am very clear as to what is the role that I am currently performing, and I am focused upon that role. And as I made that distinction between the external dimension of it and the internal manifestation of it, I think that distinction needs to be kept in mind.
I must also ask you about what Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge has accused the government of doing. He used the words "chutput yudh" or small war with Pakistan. What does that mean? What is chutput yudh?
Well, I think you should direct that question to the gentleman who articulated it. Insofar as I am concerned, I have already made those distinctions.
Tell me, the Prime Minister has addressed the nation. When he went to Adhampur, he spoke again. The Defense Minister Rajnath Singh has spoken. India's position has been articulated. It is well known. The government has also briefed close to 70 envoys based out of New Delhi. Do you think there is a need for this global outreach? So many delegations, so many members going to different parts of the world on taxpayers' money, including me.
Well, that's a very cynical way of looking at it, for the lack of a better word. And the fact is that
I'm saying we know the government point of view.
Briefing envoys is one thing. Interlocuting with decision makers in the respective state capitals is another thing altogether. And I think as a state, you need to invest much, much more in this outreach at multiple levels. All developed countries and all countries which are aspiring to be great powers have multiple channels of contact. So therefore, you have the State Department or the foreign ministries who are in touch. You have the heads of state who are in touch. You have this military to military dynamic which goes on in most cases. You have a parliament to parliament dynamic which goes on, and then you have the track 1.5, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s. So therefore, these are multiple methods of outreach. And then of course you have the political party to political party contact, right? So, and one country which does this in a very, very efficacious manner are the Chinese. And And therefore, under those circumstances, I think there is a need to actually increase the level of communication at different points of the spectrum that you have with global interlocutors in different parts of the world.
I'm glad you mentioned China because that's one stop none of the teams are going to be making. And it is important to speak to China. The footprint of China is very visible in the Pakistan military stance.
So therefore, that's an extremely valid question, and I think there is a need for the government of India to have a discussion with China, a structured discussion about how its support for Pakistan, which it calls a all-weather ally uh, or a friend through whatever crisis is, should not really start impacting on its relationship with India. And you're absolutely correct that there is the Chinese footprint, and you have the Pakistan and the Chinese military, which have this cooperation now going back to the early 60s. So yes, that is a very legitimate apprehension, and that's an apprehension that we need to address with the Chinese, as also with Turkey.
And why not a dialogue with Pakistan, Manish Tewari? Why can't two neighbors just sit down together and talk like sensible people, sensible nations?
It doesn't work.
Why? I mean, should India say, okay, we're willing to talk instead of just being stuck on the position that talks can only be about terror?
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It has been tried. And the reason why it doesn't work is the humiliation of Bangladesh is writ large on the institutional psyche of the Pakistani military. And therefore, that humiliation is the impetus for this entire infrastructure of terror that they have created. It all goes back to that meeting of 24th of January 1972, the Multan conference, which Zulfikar Ali Bhutto had then convened, where two decisions were taken. One, we'll eat grass but get a nuclear bomb, which is what led to A.Q. Khan and his nuclear Walmart. And the second was to bleed India with 1,000 cuts, which is what has led to the creation of the terror infrastructure.
So what you're saying, sorry to interrupt, what you're saying is we should be prepared for more cuts. That's the reality we're staring at.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And so therefore, as I said, that if someone thinks that one strike is going to have a salutary impact in terms of making the Pakistani deep state change its behavior completely and transform itself.
Actually, three strikes, but yes.
But transform itself. I don't think that's a very mature strategic calculus to arrive at. Essentially, what you have to tell to the Pakistanis is that if this continues, there will be a equal and proportional reaction.
You're conceding the fact that India should be prepared for another attack. But there is always a problem about escalation.
Well, as I explained to you that, if someone was to tell you that one particular retaliation or two retaliations is the panacea that is going to resolve the problem of the terror infrastructure, as I was earlier pointing out, that is not a strategically mature calculus to arrive at. What you've done between the 7th and the 10th of May is to tell Pakistan that if you continue with this recalcitrant behavior, don't think that it will go unpunished. Just because you use the nuclear shield, there is space beneath the nuclear overhang. That space will be exploited in order to render punitive punishment for your actions.
Fine. Now, before I let you go, let me ask my last question that might help allay the fears of the Congress party. Are you planning to switch sides? Any plans to join BJP?
It's a nonsensical question. So therefore, you are a friend. So therefore, I would not use strong words. But It is completely and absolutely an obtuse question. I don't think we should even be talking about it.
So you are a congressman, you stay a congressman. Am I right?
This is a very obtuse conversation, and the speculation has been going on since donkey's years. But where I am, where I am.
Fair enough. I get your point. I thank you for your time
Thank you.
and your perspective. Thank you for speaking to the Quint.
Thank you. Thank you.